what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. All right, guys, it is Friday, meaning we have our full slate of Week 14 games coming up here this Sunday. So I want to make sure that you guys get the right guys on the field so you can get into the fantasy playoffs or get your bye week or whatever you're trying to go for. If you need the win this week, I got you. Now, if you follow my channel, you know this. When I make my must-start videos, I'm not going to include any of the obvious must-start players. You should know who those guys are by now at this point. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be giving you players that might currently be on your bench that I want to encourage you to put in your starting lineup, okay? And I'm going to start right here with the very first player on my list, and that's Brandin Cooks. Now, obviously, when it comes to these players, I don't want you plugging them in over set it and forget it starters, right? But guys on here like Brandin Cooks, like I'm about to talk about, I want you to play them if you need a slot to fill, if somebody's hurt or, you have your bye week or somebody's been underperforming, right? So Brandin Cooks, the first player on my list. I think he has a smash matchup against the Eagles. Now, the Eagles, they've been giving up a lot of passing yards. In fact, they are giving up tons of points to opposing fantasy quarterbacks, opposing fantasy wide receivers, and they've been in a lot of high-scoring shootout-style games this year. And a big reason for this is not only is their secondary having issues defending the pass, but they score a lot of points. So they might not have the worst pass defense in the NFL, but teams are constantly having to throw the ball downfield to keep up with them. That's exactly what's going to happen in this Cowboys-Eagles game. I think it's going to be a very high-scoring game. The Cowboys are favored to win. That being said, I still think they're going to have to pass a ton to keep up with the Eagles. I see Brandin Cooks coming out and having 7 targets in this game, and that's a very good target total for Brandin Cooks. He's normally a guy that's only going to give you 4 or 5 targets. I see an increased target share for him in this game, especially considering the fact that him and Dak Prescott have been a lot better together over the past month. So they're really starting to gel and find their connection like was being hyped up in preseason, right? So he's starting to gel with Dak Prescott. This is going to be one of the higher scoring games on the slate. Look for Brandin Cooks to have a big play. I think he's going to get in the end zone. Either way, he's going to be targeted downfield against a secondary that's been struggling. I love Brandin Cooks in this game. He's an awesome flex for this week. I wouldn't say he's good enough to be in your wide receiver 2 slot, but if you're looking for a flex, he's a money play. Next player on my list is going to be Courtland Sutton up against the Chargers. I'm calling it right now, guys. Courtland Sutton's about to come out and have his first 100-yard game this season. Okay, hasn't had a 100-yard receiving game yet, but he's been very consistent. He's been consistently getting, 70 yards, 80 yards, stuff like that. So he's provided a very good floor, but not a very good ceiling. I think we're finally going to see the ceiling game from Courtland Sutton here. Okay, going up against the Chargers, they give up a ton of points through the air. They have one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL this season. So I love the Broncos wide receivers in this game, but really not overall, not all the wide receivers. But who I really love is Courtland Sutton. He's clearly been the wide receiver 1 in this offense. He's Russell Wilson's go-to guy. This is the vision that I had for Russell Wilson and Courtland Sutton when they first got together, and they're finally starting to click. I knew it was going to happen at some point. It's finally happened, going up against a very soft defense against the pass and a Chargers team that can put up points. Obviously, they've been bad the past few weeks, but normally the Chargers are in shootout-style games because they can put a ton of points on the board normally, and I think that they'll bounce back this week and do that. And obviously, they're pretty soft in multiple facets of their defense. So I love this to be a potential shootout game, and because of that, I think Courtland Sutton's going to come out and have double-digit targets. I think we're going to see high-value targets for Courtland Sutton in this game. Him and Russell Wilson have been connecting very well. He's a must-start this week. Next player on my list is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, you look at the past month for Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Ever since David Montgomery has come back, hasn't been quite as good as when David Montgomery was out. When David Montgomery was out, he was lighting the league on fire. So the overall carries are down, like we expected, but he's still being used heavily as a wide receiver. So you look at last game, right, when he only had 2 targets, all right, a little bit of a fluke. Before that, 3 games in a row, he combined for 19 targets, right? So, he was averaging about, 6.5 targets per game before last game where he only had 2 targets. Last game was very weird. Amon-Ra St. Brown only had 2 receptions in that game. It was just kind of an odd game altogether for the Lions. But most weeks, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be getting that kind of Austin Eckler-like target share. And he's very much reminding me of like a prime Austin Eckler. He might even be more talented though, but I mean like as far as the role, right? Like he's going to come out and get maybe 11 or 12 carries, but he's also going to see 8 or 9 targets, right? And in a game where the Lions can score a lot of points, like against the Bears, he is an absolute smash play because of his usage as a wide receiver. If he wasn't getting used so much as a wide receiver, I wouldn't say to start him, but he's getting that Austin Eckler, that prime Austin Eckler-like target share. I like him very much this week. I love him in this Lions offense, pretty much regardless of the matchup, because he can't really get scripted out because they're going to use him whether they're ahead or behind. He's a smash play going forward, especially this week against the Bears. He is going to be a money play going forward. You're definitely starting him this week. Don't let the fact that Monty's playing scare you away. Jahmyr Gibbs needs to be in your starting lineup. Next player on my list is going to be Raheem Mostert. Now, if you look at the box score for the Miami Dolphins game last week, Devon Achane looked like he had the better game. He had more touches. He had more fantasy points, multiple touchdowns as opposed to one touchdown for Raheem Mostert. But if you really watch the game and don't just look at the box scores, Raheem Mostert was still the starting running back for this team. Now, is that because it was Devon Achane's first week back? Possible. But I still think that it's very likely that this is a split backfield 50-50. A lot of people seem to think that it's going to be a 65-35 split or a 60-40 split, even 55-45. I very much don't think that's the case. Mostert is still going to receive half of the work in this backfield. Achane might see a few more targets, so for PPR formats, Achane might be a little bit more valuable, but when I see people rank these players, they're ranking them like 15, 20 spots apart. That's absolute nonsense. There's not that big of a difference between Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane as far as fantasy production going forward. Raheem Mostert is still going to get a ton of work in this backfield, and considering the fact that they're playing the Titans this week, they are favored to absolutely annihilate the Titans, should be playing from ahead from the very beginning of the game all the way through the end of the game. I mean, what do y'all think Raheem Mostert's odds of scoring a touchdown are in this game? I got to say they're pretty freaking high. He leads the league in touchdowns. His team's going to be playing from ahead in this game. The Miami Dolphins are going to have absolutely no problem putting points on the board against the Titans. Raheem Mostert is still getting half the work in this backfield. He's a big play waiting to happen because of his elite speed and big play ability. This is a guy that you have to have in your lineup. Just because Achane's back, don't let that scare you away from starting Mostert. He is a must-start player. Next player on my list is going to be Davante Adams. Now, Davante Adams, ever since the offensive coordinator change and ever since the quarterback change, has been so much better. They clearly have made it a game plan to target Davante Adams more because ever since Aiden O'Connell took over, Davante Adams is averaging over 10 targets a game. And Jimmy G was only feeding him like 4 or 5 targets a game. Probably a big reason why he lost his job, right? You got to look your best receiver's way a lot more often, especially when it's Davante Adams, still arguably the most talented wide receiver in the NFL. So get Davante Adams the freaking ball. That's clearly the game plan for the Raiders. So considering the fact that his target share is up significantly and he's actually been producing over the past 3 weeks with the new quarterback, with the new offensive coordinator, I love him in this game against the Vikings. The Vikings defense is no defense to really be scared of. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen in this game as far as the game script. I feel like this game could so easily go either way. So are they going to be playing from ahead? Are they going to be playing from behind? I don't know, but I don't think it really matters. Davante Adams is going to be a heavy part of this game script no matter what. And considering the fact that he's actually had a much better connection with Aiden O'Connell than he did earlier with Jimmy G, I love Davante Adams for the rest of the season. I think he's going to explode in the fantasy playoffs. I think he's going to be one of the biggest league-winning players in fantasy. And this week against the Vikings, that's no defense to really be all that concerned about. So I'm going to be starting Davante Adams this week. Some people might be a little bit hesitant because he's the wide receiver 17 in fantasy right now. Hasn't been nearly what people thought he was going to be. But I think we're going to see an explosion in the fantasy playoffs, and I really, really like him this week. All right, guys, those are my my not obvious must starts. The whole point of this is if you have somebody that's been underperforming, somebody that's not playing this week for some reason or another, they're out because of injury, whatever it may be. If you need a spot filled, these guys are perfect fill-ins. I think they're all going to have a huge week and could potentially win you your week. All right, guys, appreciate it, and catch you later.